my eulogious abode. Follow me past the rotting weeds, the murky lake of yellow slime, to the bloated corpse that points the way. Now, step upon the stone molars, up, 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 where we shall gather once again in the ancient skull of the giant wizard, where I, the Goblin Toad, will tell a terror tale to chill your blood. Last night I was dining with a friend who commented on the moonlight, the baying of the wolves, and the stench of the graveyard. Yet not once did she comment, not once, mind you, on the delectable repast of skewered eyeballs I prepared. Hours I slaved, stewing and seasoning those eyes, plucking them from the corpses of the freshly buried, while hiding from the eyes of the mourners, the caretakers, and the like. Proving that people seldom see things eye to eye. As Mackinlay Kantor reveals in his haunting yarn, a man who had no eyes.
A Man Who Had No Eyes by Mackinlay Kantor. A beggar was coming from the avenue just as Mr. Parsons emerged from the hotel. He was a blind beggar, carrying the traditional battered cane and thumping his way before him with the cautious, half-furtive effort of the sightless. He was a shaggy, thick-necked fellow. His coat was greasy about the lapels and pockets, and his hand splayed over the cane's crook with a futile sort of clinging. He wore a black pouch slung over his shoulder. Apparently, he had something to sell. The air was rich with spring. Sun was warm and yellowed on the asphalt. Mr. Parsons, standing there in front of his hotel and noting the clack-clack approach of the sightless man, felt a sudden and foolish sort of pity for all blind creatures. And, thought Mr. Parsons, he was very glad to be alive. A few years ago, he had been little more than a skilled laborer. Now he was successful, respected, admired, insurance, and he had done it all alone, unaided, struggling beneath handicaps. And he was still young. The blue air of spring, fresh from its memories of windy pools and lush shrubbery, could thrill him with eagerness. He took a step forward just as the tap-tapping blind man passed him by. Quickly, the shabby fellow turned.
Listen, Governor, just a minute of your time.
Mr. Parsons said, "It's late. I have an appointment. Do you want me to give you something?"
I ain't no beggar, Governor. You bet I ain't. I got a handy little article here.
He fumbled until he could press a small object into Mr. Parsons' hand.
That I sell. $1. Best cigarette lighter made.
Mr. Parsons stood there, somewhat annoyed and embarrassed. He was a handsome figure with his immaculate gray suit and gray hat and malacca stick. Of course, the man with the cigarette lighters could not see him. "But I don't smoke," he said.
Listen, I bet you know plenty of people who smoke. Nice little present, wheedled the man. And mister, you wouldn't mind helping a poor guy out. He clung to Mr. Parsons' sleeve.
Mr. Parsons sighed and felt in his vest pocket. He brought out $2 half and pressed them into the man's hand. "Certainly, I'll help you out. As you say, I can give it to someone. Maybe the elevator boy would—" He hesitated, not wishing to be boorish and inquisitive, even with a blind peddler. "Have you lost your sight entirely?" The shabby man pocketed the $2 half. "14 years, Governor." Then he added with an insane sort of pride, "Westbury, sir. I was one of them." "Westbury," repeated Mr. Parsons. "Ah, yes, the chemical explosion. The papers haven't mentioned it for years. But at the time, it was supposed to be one of the greatest disasters in—" "They've all forgot about it." The fellow shifted his feet wearily.
"I tell you, Governor, a man who was in it don't forget about it. Last thing I ever saw was C-Shop going up in one grand smudge. And that damn gas pouring in at all the busted windows."
Mr. Parsons coughed, but the blind peddler was caught up with the train of his one dramatic reminiscence. And, also, he was thinking that there might be more $50 in Mr. Parsons' pocket.
Just think about it, Governor. There was 108 people killed, about 200 injured, and over 50 of them lost their eyes, blind as bats.
He groped forward until his dirty hand rested against Mr. Parsons' coat.
I tell you, sir, there wasn't nothing worse than that in the war. If I lost my eyes in the war, okay, I would have been well took care of. But I was just a workman, working for what was in it. And I got it. You're damn right I got it. While the capitalists were making their dough, they was insured. Don't worry about that. They
Insured, repeated his listener. Yes, that's what I sell. You want to know how I lost my eyes? Cried the man.
Well, here it is.
His words fell with the bitter and steady drama of a story often told, and told for money.
I was there in C-Shop, last of all the folks rushing out. Out in the air there was a chance, even with the buildings exploding right and left. A lot of guys made it safe out the door and got away. And just when I was about there, crawling along between those big vats, a guy behind me grabs me leg. He says, "Let me past you."
Maybe he was nuts. I don't know. I tried to forgive him in me heart, Governor, but he was bigger than me. He hauls me back and climbs right over me, tramples me into the dirt, and he gets out, and I lie there with all that poison gas pouring down on all sides of me, and flaming stuff. He swallowed a studied sob and stood dumbly expectant. He could imagine the next words. Tough luck, my man. Damn tough. Now I want to... That's the story, Governor. The spring wind shrilled past them, damp and quivering. Not quite, said Mr. Parsons. The blind peddler shivered crazily.
Not quite? What do you mean?
The story is true, Mr. Parsons said, except that it was the other way around.
Other way around? He croaked unamiably. Say, Governor.
I was in C-Shop, said Mr. Parsons. It was the other way around. You were the fellow who hauled back on me and climbed over me. You were bigger than I was, Markwort. The blind man stood there for a long time, swallowing hoarsely. He gulped. "Parsons! By God! By God, I thought you..." And then he screamed fiendishly.
Yes, maybe so. Maybe so. But I'm blind. I'm blind, and you've been standing here letting me spout to you and laughing at me every minute. I'm blind.
People in the street turned to stare at him.
You got away, but I'm blind, you hear?
Well, said Mr. Parsons, don't make such a row about it, Markwort. So am I.
I see, said the blind man, and so did Mr. Parsons. Unfortunately, Markwort remained sightless all the rest of his days, until he was run down by a blind drunk. And now a special treat. Toasted eyeballs, anyone? I'll avoid the green one.